I spoke to Tal Hagen. Tal is an information warfare researcher at Fake Reporter, an Israeli watchdog that exposes foreign influence campaigns and disinformation and provides fact-checking. During the recent war with Iran and the conflict in Gaza, for example, Fake Reporter debunked Iranian state media's false claim about a missile strike near a hospital and corrected the Israeli president after he falsely claimed that a real photo of hungry children in Gaza had been staged. Tal, thank you so much for joining us on Battle Lines. Let's run through two specific examples that we've been talking about. The first is a short video of a man called Salim Asfal, we believe, an elderly Palestinian man in Gaza, who you can see is little more than skin and bones. Lots of people were saying that this video was fake because he just looks so emaciated, and I think there were some discrepancies around his hand. Just tell me, what did you do to verify this image?
So when I looked at the image, I saw that everyone was calling the image AI. So when we're looking at AI imagery, it's first important to understand that there are various different types of visual manipulation. There can be outright AI generation where you put a prompt in it and it spits out a photo. It can be AI splicing where it'll take a real image or video and then add on to it AI, which is much more realistic the way it looks. It could be Photoshop. And so when I looked at this image, I tried to figure out, what am I looking at here? What a lot of people noticed, and you just pointed out, was the finger. On the finger, it looked like he had another finger growing out of his middle finger, I think it was. And so we know that one of the issues with AI generated content is that it makes extra fingers. It's not that great with details. And therefore, it has to be AI, right? Well, instead of us rushing to that type of conclusion, we need to ask ourselves, what if it isn't AI? What if there's another explanation for this? And so what I did is I went and I looked for higher definition footage. I wanted to find higher quality. And when I did, I noticed that it was a tiny white mark that was specifically on his middle finger. It wasn't an extra finger. And it moved consistently with him whenever he was moving around. And that was not consistent with how AI usually operates on its own. Another issue that people put out is I think it was his left shoulder, that it looked really, really weird. And it has to be AI because his left shoulder doesn't make any sense. I know anatomy, and that's not how a left shoulder looks. Well, this is where we have to understand our own biases and where our ignorance is. I don't have a medical degree. Maybe he was injured when he was younger, and that's why his arm looks like that. Or maybe it was AI generated. But the point is, we have to understand our limitations. And so when I looked at this photo, I said, well, I don't see any inconsistency with the arm being AI generated, and it's inconclusive why his arm looks like that. So I came to the conclusion that this is very likely to be real. I don't see any manipulation whatsoever. And then, because so many people had talked about this image being fake, the journalists and the people on the ground who knew the person uploaded more photos and videos of him, which essentially confirmed that the person was real. And he did have some type of little white ailment on his middle finger, and his shoulder really was like that due to some type, I think, injury or also cause from the malnutrition.
One of the phrases that I came across while looking into this issue is Pallywood, this idea of a Palestinian Hollywood where Hamas are staging scenes of hunger and there are crisis actors pretending to be dead children. It's obviously something that we came across in the Syrian civil war. There were lots of allegations that there were crisis actors in Aleppo and Homs, all spread by Russian misinformation. And now we're seeing it again here in Gaza. What's your experience of this? Are there scenes that are being staged?
I've followed a lot of different cases where people have made these types of allegations. I haven't seen anything on that level. I see very specific instances where something looks a little bit odd or certain things are filmed in a certain manner to give off a certain impression, but nothing on the level of crisis actors getting on a TV set and lying about the situation and spraying ketchup on themselves in order to look like they were injured. Something that I think is important to understand within the context of Hollywood is it's a reoccurring theme. You actually just mentioned it with Syria, and I also saw it recently with Israel. After the Israeli-Iranian war that happened, I saw the term Israeli wood, where people were then trying to kind of like turn it on its head from Hollywood to Israeli wood. And they would discuss how, oh, look, they're holding the same child twice. They weren't the same child, but because they look similar, they're all faking it. This building actually was set for demolition. There was no rocket that actually hit the building or the missile. And what it made me realize is that Hollywood or Syria wood or Israeli wood is a symptom of people refusing to acknowledge what they see in front of them. That everything that occurs that is against the way that I view the world has to be fake. It can't be real. If I can't explain it, if it isn't 100% explainable to me, it isn't real. And that is a reoccurring thing that I've seen again and again and again when it comes to different types of concepts like Pallywood.
I want to come back to that again in a minute because that's just such a fascinating and quite disturbing and dark idea that you're bringing up. But first, I just want to understand a bit more who's behind this misinformation. You mentioned grifters. Is there any sense that this is a state-sponsored effort on the Israeli side to debunk ideas of famine in Gaza, or by the Iranian side in terms of Israeli deaths during the Iranian bombardment, for example?
So I can't speak to how much either the Israeli government, the Iranian government, the Hamas government, in terms of funding behind these projects. We do know that, of course, there are different Iranian officials who propagate certain types of ideas, or Israeli government who provides funding to different types of advocacy groups to push certain types of messaging. But one of the reasons, for example, when you discuss the Israeli government and the case of famine, and with the Israeli government pushing the narrative that there is no famine, that it's all fake, is primarily because that's currently what the subject matter is. That is the topic, starvation and famine in the Gaza Strip. And so that's what not just the Israeli government, but also Israeli supporters are going to be focused on. Sometimes when we talk about campaigns, I think that we misuse the terminology because a campaign a lot of the times insinuates that there is very much a top-down methodology where everyone is sitting in a room. They say, you're going to say this and this and this, and this is going to be pushed out into the group. But a lot of the times, it's much more natural. You know, if I'm a pro-Israel supporter and I see Israeli government officials or people pushing out that everything happening in Gaza is a lie, then I'm not going to question that because that's my side, and I'm going to want to join in on the fight. The same thing with different Palestinian officials, where they will push out certain narratives, or Hamas officials will push out certain narratives, and then pro-Palestinian supporters who support Hamas will then push out the narratives in cohesion because they agree with the message. I've seen this happen behind the scenes, and I've seen this also happening in real time, where when people care about a topic that has to do with what they believe in, they're going to push it out. It might look like it's a campaign, but it's actually much more natural in the way that it goes out.
When it comes to, the Israeli president or the Israeli prime minister holding up pictures of starving children and saying, this is fake news, how do you tackle that?
So when it comes to photos like that, like what recently happened with the president, he specifically like put up a photo from the Build article of the aid distribution sites, and he talked about the fact that it was a staged photo from an aid distribution site. When the team at Fake Reporter, we showcased that it was an aid distribution site. That was not true. That it wasn't, and this photographer was simply there before they started handing out the food. When it comes to photos of starvation, them saying it's starvation, I try to be very careful personally about which photos I try to verify, especially when it comes to kids, simply because I don't want to mess up. I don't want even the slightest example that I accidentally dilute or take away from the severity of what that child has gone through. But if I'm able to 100% know that I can debunk these types of narratives, factually speaking, then I will.
I want to talk about another example that you mentioned to me earlier, and that's about Anas al-Sharif, the Al Jazeera journalist who was killed in a targeted assassination by Israel earlier this month, along with several of his colleagues. Israel repeatedly said that he worked for Hamas, both before his death and after his death. He denied that while he was still alive, of course, and Al Jazeera has repeatedly denied that since his death. But one of the bits of evidence held up online to support Israel's claim was that he posted on October the 7th on Telegram to cheer on Hamas militants as they conducted their awful massacre in southern Israel. Some on the Palestinian side claimed that that was faked, but you debunked that. Can you explain how?
Yeah. So I saw that everyone was talking about these messages. Of course, there was a lot of different types of evidence that were being put out there. There were the messages of support, that's how they were viewed support for Hamas and what they had done on October 7th and afterwards via Telegram. When it comes to Al Sharif's alleged affiliation with Hamas, and that was based on documentation that was showcased by the IDF, which there's nothing really I can do with that. I mean, that's documentation that the IDF has. There's no way for me to verify that independently. And so there's nothing I could do there. And so when it came to the messages, I was curious, did he actually say that? So I looked through his Telegram channel, and it's true that it doesn't appear in his Telegram channel. But then I found that connected to Anas al Sharif's Telegram channel was the comment channel that is directly connected to his channel. And when I went to that channel, I found that the message was still there. And I was able to verify that it had been deleted by looking at other messages that had been deleted from his main channel, but still appeared on the community commentary channel. And so that's how I was able to verify indeed that the message is real, that it did exist. Now, what does that mean? For me, it doesn't mean anything. It just means that the message was verified, and then I put it out there that it was verified, and then people can use it how they wish. Now, something happens with this type of verification that is important to understand. I think it's a learning lesson for people. The narrative became that this message from Telegram justifies him being killed. And then Palestinians, pro-Palestinian activists who uploaded that claim, what they essentially did is say that this message is fake because if this message is real, then it justifies him being killed. That's how I read it, and that's how most people are going to read it. And so when I fact checked that verification of that specific Telegram message, and they were called out on lying about it, it didn't matter afterwards that they said that it doesn't matter what he wrote, it doesn't matter if he supported Hamas, he shouldn't have been killed anyways. The entire message that they were trying to push is completely diluted by them pushing a fake story as the title of their claim. And this connects to a bigger thing that I think is very, very important to take into account is every time you make a statement, every time you push out a certain type of narrative, you need to verify everything you're saying. Because the degree of everything having to be 100% correct is so important nowadays because even if you make one mistake, anything you do that is wrong is seen as malicious. And so this should be a learning experience that when you're trying to push a certain type of narrative, understand the consequences if what you're saying is not true and verify what you're saying before you push it out there.
Does it worry you that the Israeli government, the Israeli army, various Israeli officials are sharing fake news, potentially in the knowledge even that it's fake, just to support their narrative that their war against Hamas is justified? I'm just wondering how you feel about that as an Israeli citizen.
I think it's less relevant to me being an Israeli citizen. I'm not my government, and I'm not. I represent myself, and that's how I've always seen it, and my loved ones, and not by a government entity. And what I'm more concerned with is that I think that it's when I look at the Israeli government, when we look at people in power and we look at who holds those positions of power, we hope that they are the best of the best. That they are the ones who are representing our country, who are representing the needs, to make sure that my taxes are lower, to make sure that my country is safe, to make sure that we are doing things by the book. And when I see government officials or military leaders publishing things that I'm able to debunk, and I don't have the knowledge and the capabilities that many of these people have, and I'm able to debunk it, that's a very scary realization to me. That the people in charge, the people who are actively paving the way for the agendas within the Israeli government don't know how to do basic verification. And that tells me that they're operating based on warped realities in front of them. And that's very concerning.
One last question. What reception does your work get? I presume it's very unpopular on all sides when you're debunking or verifying something that the others want to believe is true. How has that affected you? What kind of reception does your work get?
The reception to my work really depends on what I'm debunking that day or what I'm verifying that day. So if the content that I analyze gives a pro-Israel, like a win for the pro-Israel crowd, then I'm called a genocide Zionist supporter. And if my work comes out, debunking something that supports the pro-Palestinian agenda, then I'm a Hamas-loving terrorist. That's usually the type of reception that I get when it comes to these types of pieces. And a lot of the issue is also assumptions that are made. When I always try to have that my work doesn't have an agenda behind it. And what I mean by that is that when I verified that the image of the old Palestinian man was not fake, it was real, or when I verified that the journalist Al Sharif's message was real and not fake, There is no commentary behind that. I'm not trying to tell you anything, but people assume there is. Oh, so you're saying it's good that they killed him. Oh, you're saying that there is starvation in Gaza. No, I'm not saying either of those things. All I said is what you can read in the text, which is this and this. And that is something that is a big issue also that I've noticed, which is that people make these assumptions about everything. If you say one thing, then you have to believe in something else. And so I usually do get hatred across the board, depending on what I post, but I also get a lot of empathy and supports. I have pretty famous, well known journalists and activists from the pro Israel and pro Palestinian scene that reach out to me privately for verification, for help analyzing content. And so I see that beyond the shouting match of social media, the people I think I would say who matter, who actually make changes on the ground, they reach out for help and they see my work for what it is, as a tool for them to be able to for their work. And that's how I see myself, as someone who is there to help verify the information. What happens with that information isn't up to me. And so I would always define myself as I'm the person who creates the tool, and it's your job to use the tool. How the tool is used is not up to me.
That was Tal Hagen from Israeli watchdog Fake Reporter.